So this is my full in-depth review of the new Taylormade M4 Driver. I've had this driver in my bag for the last 2 weeks. I've been out on the golf course with this driver. I have tested this driver on multiple different days using GC Quad and Pro V1s to give you the most in-depth review of this product. I'm going to answer your questions in this video, and I'm also going to give the M4 Driver my final conclusion. So Taylormade claim they're still packing as much technology into this driver as possible, but it does come at a cheaper price point, this driver, at roughly around £100 cheaper / $80 cheaper. It features twist face, still as the M3 does, so a way of helping find more fairways on off-centered hits. HammerHead technology to keep the ball speed hot on low hits, but instead of the weight track along the back, the Y track, this technology, which is a debatable word technology if truth be told, is geacoustic, and this is a way of designing the head differently for it to sound more explosive. There is a weight port here at the back. It still has the adjustable sleeve for loft like the M3 has, and it still looks pretty awesome. Let's show you the data and give you some ideas of what I found when I hit this driver on GC Quad and out on the golf course too. So M4 testing. I tested this on 3 different occasions in GC Quad here at the Golf Academy and took it out on the golf course and played with it a couple of times first. I'm going to talk a little bit about my findings about the tech, and certainly the twist face. I found it to be a little bit different to the M3 twist face, and I'll explain why I think that's the case. Let's dive through the actual numbers first of the testing process. So these are 3 different days, 10 shots plus on each of the days. So we've got my optimum performance data up on screen. These are all the performance data from the last 12 months of testing drivers. So we now bring in the M4 numbers into this chart, and we see a couple of surprising factors, but the big numbers are actually bang on target. So we look at the carry distance, that is in that optimum performance range that I like to see with the driver. It's just under 279 yards, and for a total distance of 298. I would see, and I saw this throughout the full testing with the M4, the ball speed was a fraction lower than I was getting with M3. Spin rate was a touch high. It was at about 2,600, but I managed to drop it down to 2,300 by actually lowering the loft. I actually cranked the loft down by 0.66 of a degree to bring this 9.5 degree head into a 8.9 degree head, and I brought those spin figures down a little bit. The M4, like the M2 and the M1 in the past, the M4 has always been a slightly higher spin model. I've used the same shaft. This is the 10 size shaft, 70 gram X Flex. So for me, the numbers on ball data was solid, nothing outstanding, but nothing that was too disappointing. These are all my club data. So we see here club head speed, smash factor. I was slightly hitting more on the way up, more than I average do through my product testing. So that might have been why I was just presenting a little bit more loft and maybe just hitting it a touch higher than what I normally see. But I didn't want to, I did crank the loft even lower, but I actually then didn't like the ball flight. I found it come out too flat. I didn't like that ball flight, so I kept it at that kind of 8.9 degrees. So all the product testing actually in the academy, it hit the criteria, no problem at all, and it did get an approval in that category, but again, nothing outstanding. But let's talk about the main features, twist face. Now, this driver, the M4, because they've shaved more of the back of the driver out, it's actually a little bit of a deeper face. And because of that, as I set the club behind the ball, I would say the twist face on the M4 is just ever so slightly more noticeable. I seem to see a little bit more of the toe flaring outwards, a little bit more loft, a little bit more outwards than I was recognizing in the M3. The other big thing I definitely noticed without question was the loudness of this driver. The geacoustic design across the back, the way they've shaped it differently, definitely makes this driver sound much louder. I actually want to get to a point where I can measure driver sounds and actually measure the volume, the frequency it's coming off at. If you have any suggestions of how I can do that, I'd love to hear your thoughts below. But really, just straight away, it was an ear-piercingly loud sound. Some will like it, some will hate it. I was in the camp of hating it. I actually preferred the M3 sound. So then we get back to this twist face, and did it see any difference of performance out on the golf course? This is my little red book of testing. I made loads of notes when I tested it, and these are my findings on some of the shots that I hit off centre. So as a generalization over the twist face, I found this particular driver, for the way I hit the ball a little bit high toe and a little bit open, I found with the M4 that the results seemed to favour more of a shot that would go to the right. I found shots with the M4 to leak a little bit more to the right, and it gave me no alterations to be able to crank any weights or anything to put it into a setting that's different. And the only way I can put that down to, potentially with it being a slightly deeper head and that toe flare being, it seems just a little bit more pronounced. When I caught that high toe, I did see shots that leaked off to the right. And really, on paper, that's what Taylormade are claiming they're doing more of. If you hit toe, they've seen in results that the ball will go further left and miss target left. Well, certainly I didn't find shots from hitting off the toe that I went any further left. In fact, I was struggling to hit it left off those toe shots. So in one degree, they've kind of, that's a bonus for players who hit the toe and go left. But for someone like me who hits the toe and particularly draws it, I was struggling to get that shape that I require and I desire from normal bulge and roll. And some of the shots I saw here, this was actually day one of testing, and this was shot number 3, and I absolutely nailed this. There was no question about the performance on a good hit is exceptional when I got them right, and it was just awesome. Nailed the 3rd shot. But then we saw shots where I hit the toe on shot 5, and it kind of found the fairway. I wasn't massively impressed, but it got back to fairway. So shot number 8, day 1, this was one that really kind of shocked me and really started to make me question about twist face. On this particular shot, I swung through the golf ball unbelievably straight. My path and my face was super straight, and I've hit a location that's high toe. This ball finished for me 28.7 yards to the right. And that seems like a long way considering everything was square. With normal bulge and roll, I would typically see a shot that might draw back towards middle, if not go further left. But when I presented everything square and hit the toe, it went to the right for me. And that was a shock moment, I must admit. But then again, it backed up a couple of shots later where shot number 10 I absolutely screamed. Oh, nailed it. So that was kind of interesting to me. I felt like it had a more of a right bias when I didn't hit it well. And the whole idea of twist face is to stop the ball curving left too far. And I'll tell you what, I would say that I didn't see the ball curving left too far off toe hits. In fact, I almost saw a little bit too much of the opposite effect. So I went out on the golf course and played golf with the M4. Played twice on the golf course, a couple of testing courses, and the 10th hole, West Lancs, I tried to hit a monster draw. I've hit it from the toe, and it has missed the fairway a long way to the right. And this is what I want you to remember with this twist face. The player will still override everything that happens. And believe me when I say I can still hit this driver, and you will be able to still hit this driver out of bounds. It is not a miracle cure. It's not going to make everybody hit the ball straight. I think it's going to help some golfers, but not particularly everybody. But then the very next shot, I've absolutely crunched out the middle again, and it's gone like a rocket ship. It is flown. I think we measured it 350 plus yards. But then every time I tried to draw it, 13th hole tried to draw it, couldn't. 15th hole tried to fade it, hit the toe, and it faded. And I thought, when I looked up at the flight on 15, I thought that ball was going to go too far to the left. But it stayed relatively straight, and if anything, slightly over-faded. So really, twist face, for me, wasn't doing a great deal. And don't forget, these are all shots that I've not purposely hit from the toe or heel. These are just organic shots that took place. Then I took it round Formby Ladies golf course, and one of the tightest golf courses that I could ever use a driver from, but I'll give it a go. 2nd hole, I hit toe and it went left. Just to clarify that twist face isn't going to save your world, the player's still going to override it. 4th hole, tried to hit a fade, hit the toe and it faded too far. But then the 8th hole, absolutely annihilated it again. It's dead straight, down the fairway. So it feels like it's got a mixed personality. And I know I don't hit shots straight all the time, but I felt like some shots that I hit in certain locations on this face, I was expecting to look and see one ball flight, and I saw a completely different ball flight. And that was somewhat of a concern for me. A couple of other shots that I noticed on GC Quad was day 2, shot 10, I hit it absolutely out the screws. When I got it right, it was a flying machine. But when I didn't quite get it right, and I didn't match up to what Taylormade was saying this driver's going to fix, I found not great results, bad results in my opinion, for this way I hit the golf shot. And in the final day of testing, hit one shot, high toe, went right, again open face. But then I hit another one which was a toe hit and it went left with a closed face. So I found mixed results, very mixed results, and for me, somewhat unexpected results. And this is where I found that the M4 was way more of a fade type golf club because of the way that that flare opens to the right. But if I found it fade, another golfer that hits a different part of the face might find it a completely different ball flight, entirely. And this is where I see completely with the M3 and M4 range that you've got to test it as a golfer because everybody is individual. And I mean that, everybody is individual. And to put a blanket cover on the fact that a guy who hits high toe is going to be closed face, that's not always the case. And a lady who hits low heel, are they always going to be open? No, that's not the case. Now what I did see good signs of was HammerHead again was doing a good job. When I hit low hits, I didn't see a huge drop off in ball speed, but with HammerHead, we've seen that work in drivers before. Saw it work in the original M2 with the speeds pocket. They've just added some ribs, and I think, like I said, it's a bit of a competitor for Epic. But for me, I didn't see any drop off in ball speed, nothing noticeable off those low hits. Right, let's get to some of your questions. You've got some great ones coming along, some general topics to talk about. I'm going to give my final conclusion of the Taylormade M4 Driver. It's such a different noise to M3 still. Right, questions that have come in from you guys. The first thing, and this was quite a hot topic actually, and I thought, I must admit, more people might know about this between M1 and M2, is why is the M4 cheaper and does it drop off in performance? Well, the big thing for me really, the only thing that makes it cheaper is that you don't have as much adjustable weights. So there's no adjustable track at the back. This is really the only thing you can adjust is the loft sleeve, and that is pretty much it. Regards to performance, actually performance on paper, I didn't really see any massive differences apart from the fact that the weight is a little bit further back, therefore you're going to see a little bit of a higher spin as a generalization. That's not, again, always going to be the case. So really it's cheaper just because you can't adjust it as much as M3. So another really common question was, is it any better than last year's M2? So again, just on generalization of testing, I don't see that much of a difference in performance. Looks wise, I think it looks a lot better than last year's M2. The way that it's way more symmetrical at the bottom. I'm a big fan of the silver top. I know many people aren't a big fan, they actually prefer the white, but I really love that bottom, way more symmetrical, silver top. So personally, I think it looks better than last year's M2, but still, in my opinion, it doesn't look as good as the first ever generation M2. I still think it's one of the best looking drivers ever made, and this doesn't quite stack up to it. From my opinion, I think if you've got last year's M1 or M2 or the year before M1 and M2, are you going to see much of a difference in performance? Probably not. But if you do fit in Taylormade's category in the fact of being a closed face high toe or an open face and a heely shot, you might benefit from very small amounts. That's the only way you can work out is if you actually test it. But for me, on paper performance, there's not going to be that much difference between this and M2 from last year. So big kind of question, would this club go in my bag? And the answer to that is no, not unless something dramatically changes again. For me, there was a couple of reasons why it wouldn't go in the bag. As much as I love the look of this driver, and as soon as I ripped the head cover off and I saw it, I was like, oh yeah, so much better look. I like the feel. I'm not the biggest fan of the sound. It's a little bit on the high side, loud side. And then the technology with the twist face, I just didn't feel like for the way I hit the golf ball, it suits my game. But that doesn't mean that's a blanket for everybody. I just think that I'm maybe in a slightly different alternative where I use the gearing effect to my advantage. I use bulge and roll to my gains. A lot of other golfers will not. They won't know that particularly to be the case. I'm a little bit more fine-tuned to the levels of strike where I'm hitting the face, and I see and expect different ball flights from those locations. I would have loved to have seen this year, and I'd love to have seen this, but they would have been slated for doing it, is if they would have brought out a conventional M3 and M4, and then brought out, or at the same time, a twist face version. But wow, the backlash would have been tremendous. So for me, it wouldn't go in the bag. I think for the price point, it's if you don't need to be adjusted, then great. You might want to slip into M4 rather than M3. But I cannot stress this enough. For these two brands, for these two golf clubs, for these the M3 and M4, you have to test these before you even attempt to think about buying them, because there are going to be golfers it suits, but there are going to be golfers it does not suit. Thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, hit that like button. Let me know in the comments below what you think of the new review style. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I feel like I've given this a real test. Find out as much information as I can to share with you guys. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned. Lots more to come. And we'll see you next time. That was the Taylormade M4 Driver review. And we'll see you next time. Actually nailed that one. Take it all back.